Good evening. Thank you for joining us here today on this historic election day in Pennsylvania. And thanks especially to Pima, who are the true frontline heroes of the day and of the week and of the months and of the year, frankly. So thank you to Melissa and to Randy Padfield, the director, and Jeff Thomas and all the folks here at Pima who have just been keeping us all safe. I can't thank you enough. Pennsylvania has undergone extraordinary change in how we vote and how we conduct elections in just a few short months. For the first time with this election, Pennsylvanians had the opportunity to vote by mail without having to provide an excuse. Thanks to the bipartisan legislation passed last year, Act 77, all Pennsylvania voters have been able to vote by mail, have shorter registration periods, and many other reforms that have given them greater access to democracy like never before. Also, as of today, all Pennsylvania counties have deployed new, secure, accessible voting systems, which every one of provide a voter-verifiable and auditable paper trail. At the same time that these extraordinary changes are being implemented, we also face a global pandemic and civil unrest here in Pennsylvania and nationwide. Yesterday, I had a press conference, and I said that today would look and feel differently than any election before in our lifetimes, and it did. These are unprecedented times, and we are constantly reminded why our democracy has never been so important. And these factors are why I'm so happy to be here today to report that today's election in the Commonwealth went remarkably smoothly, and we have no widespread issues to report. Our team at the Department of State answered more than 3,600 calls today to the Commonwealth Voter Information Hotline. Most calls were routine, things like asking for polling place location, registration status, questions about their absentee or mail-in ballots, and other very routine questions. There were very few significant issues. A few examples. One county's printer printed some ballots that were too large for the scanners. Those ballots were instead deposited into ballot boxes and will be centrally counted by the county. Another county had some ballots that the code on the ballots was not properly scanning. Same thing, they were deposited into secure ballot boxes and the county will be scanning them centrally. In a few places, as we expected, some protests caused a few challenges, including a courthouse closure in one county. In cases where there were complaints, of course, we've directed those to county election officials, and they have been following up. The number of incidents or concerns reported this year were less than any prior year I can recall in recent history. In the coming days and weeks and months, I'm looking forward to working with our county election officials across the Commonwealth to learn all we can from this primary election and ensure that the general election is a smooth process for voters, whether by mail or in person or in-person at election offices and all the other means that Act 77 provided. A few details. So as everyone knows, several cities and communities across the Commonwealth saw tensions turn into civil unrest over the past few days, and Governor Wolf activated the Commonwealth Response Coordination Center here at Pima. Department of State has worked closely with Pima and our other state and federal election partners over the last several days, as well as the counties impacted, to ensure that every voter could go to the polls and exercise their right to vote. In addition, you all heard, I'm sure, about the governor's executive order issued last evening, which will allow 6 counties that were most impacted by the civil unrest, the voters in those counties, as long as they postmarked their ballots by today, it will allow the counties to receive those ballots over the coming days as long as they receive it by next Tuesday. Again, the ballots had to be postmarked by today, so voters in all counties across the Commonwealth needed to either hand deliver or in those 6 counties mail by today. This election year, as I've said, has been one of tremendous change. And so those mail-in ballots were a huge, huge success, and thank goodness for Act 77 providing that opportunity to voters. Because of COVID-19, we had a unprecedented surge. So in just a matter of months, over 1.8 million voters applied for mail-in or absentee ballots. That's 17 times greater than in the previous presidential primary election. We, of course, don't have the total numbers yet of the cast ballots and the cast votes. But earlier this afternoon, over 1.3 million ballots had already been received back from voters and logged by counties. Some counties had received more than 90% of the ballots that they had sent out. So I want to give specific credit to Sullivan County and Forest County, which led the Commonwealth in the percentage of ballots that they got back from voters. And just to give you context, when I say more than 90% in some counties were received back, when you look back at 2012, which was the last non-contested primary, approximately 76% of the absentee ballots that were applied for were returned by voters. Most counties in the Commonwealth, even before we got to the end of the deadline tonight, had already received more than 75 or 80% back this year. So already we've exceeded the percentage that we would expect back and the total turnout that we might expect. So we'll see when all ballots are counted. Of course, we'll have those final numbers for you. As we've said before, we expect that as a result of this surge, that there will be some delays in vote counting, but the counties are committed. Some counties have already been counting all day. As you all know, under Act 12 of 2020, the counties could now start canvassing the ballots at 7 a.m. Many counties did and have been canvassing ballots all day. So I do expect that some counties will be able to get results today, but many counties will not. So the counties are, of course, are first and foremost committed to accurate and secure counting of every vote. I want to again express my most sincere thanks to all our election security partners who had even greater challenges this year than ever before. This includes the federal and state Departments of Homeland Security, Pennsylvania DMVA and the National Guard, the Pennsylvania State Police, the Office of Information Technology, and of course PEMA, as I've already said, for their hard work today and for the months leading up to this. I also can't thank enough every county election official and every poll worker in this Commonwealth. They had challenges that none of us have seen the likes before, and I am just endlessly impressed and astounded by what they've allowed us to do this year. So thank you to the voters for their patience. Yesterday I talked about patience and gratitude, and I think both the voters and the poll workers and the election officials brought that with them today. And because of that, we had a safe, secure, and peaceful election. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes?
In the counties where there will not be official results tonight, when can we expect official results?
Over the next couple of days, it's going to vary. Probably many will be tomorrow, is my guess. I think you'll see, some variation for sure based on the amount that they got in, and of course, maybe the number of protests that they may be dealing with on a local level. But it will be soon. Yes.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on the situation where you said the protests caused the courthouse to be closed, and did that impact the county election office and what they were doing?
So no, and then it was in Lawrence County, and what they did was they sent home workers from the courthouse, but they had an exemption for the election personnel, so they were able to stay and get the ballots counted. Yes.
For the issues that you mentioned, Secretary, just about the ballots being too large in one county, another county having codes that wouldn't scan, were those locally here? Can you tell us where those were?
Sure. Bucks County was the one where the ballots were cut too large, and they were able to so they were able to fix some of them, but the ones that had already been voted, they just deposited into a ballot box.
And was the county central, you said?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the ballot codes was York, is that correct, or is it Lancaster? Lancaster.
And how many did that affect as far as locations? Would that have been everyone?
Jonathan, do you know?
It wasn't every location in Lancaster, but it was a number of locations. It was a pretty substantial number of locations, and it wasn't even every ballot. It was only certain ballots.
So,
And
yes.
does that have to do with any issues with the new voting machines, or was that just what caused some of these issues?
So Bucks County, it was literally the size of the ballots as they were cut. So picture, if your scanner requires a, 8.5 by 11, and instead you have an 8.5 by 11.25, it might not be able to fit through. So Bucks was one of the 22 counties that was using their systems for the first time. So you could say that that's about the systems, but it's really not. It's literally about the size of the paper. For Lancaster, same thing. It was completely a printer issue. Lancaster had used their system last election. It was not about the scanners. It was about it was too light, the code that was printed. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so just the ones that were too light were not being picked up sufficiently by the scanner. Any other questions? Yes.
The counties where they have the deadline to get the deadline was the postmarket date. There's obviously a certain number of votes that aren't going to be able to count in for another week. Are they just waiting for all the ballots to come in before they count the mail-in ballots, or are they counting them tonight, the ones they have?
So Jonathan, I know my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that they have to follow the terms of the election code, but it doesn't give specifics about.
Right, they have to be segregated. That's the most important point. They have to be kept from all other ballots. So they can't be intermingled with the election day ballots and the ones they receive before the deadline. But the executive order doesn't say that they're going to be canvassed or counted on a specific date. It says, though, that they have to be segregated from all other ballots so in the event of, a challenge or some other thing, they'll know exactly which ballots were received after the statutory deadline.
And I'll just add to that, because obviously they need to follow the Pennsylvania election code, of course, all the same provisions that would cover the canvassing of absentee or mail-in ballots would apply, so they would have to allow watchers and candidates to designate people to observe in a balance of parties and so forth.
I guess just because of the volume of people in those counties, if there's 900,000 ballots sitting out there, I'm just curious, are we counting any of those now, or do we have to wait a week?
So I think it's going to be determined by the county, but remember, they have to be postmarked today, so we don't expect there to be a huge amount more because it's the ones that were already postmarked and mailed. So I think we know the universe because of the number that were mailed out by the counties. I'm sure we'll hear more from the 6 counties about what their schedules are, and we'll provide that information as we go. Yes.
Could you elaborate on why those 6 counties in particular were issued an extension as opposed to the whole Commonwealth?
Sure. So those counties were the places that had interruptions because of the riots and disturbances and civil unrest. So some of those counties had closures of their election offices. Some of those counties had travel interruptions where roads were shut down. Some of them had curfews. And so they all contributed to restricting the ability of those voters to participate and get their ballots in on time. And it was tied to those 6 counties. Yes.
Took a few calls today about voter confusion with the new ballots and the new machines, obviously. Can you just kind of elaborate on maybe some things you might be changing for November, if anything at all, just about voters with the filling in of the circles and inserting the papers and all that? It kind of threw some folks, I think, today.
Yeah. So it's been, I think for the counties, it's one of the reasons why it was great that 45 counties rolled out their new voting systems in 2019. So for those voters, it was not the first time that they were using them. And I think, like anything else, when we, in 2004 or 5, when we transitioned from the old lever machines or punch cards to the electronic machines, there was learning time and voter, education. So we started an initiative last year called Ready to Vote 2020. And then the beginning of this year, as a piece of that, one of the things we did was we created, and thanks to the comms team at the Department of State, they created 67 individualized web pages for each county, which show the voters what voting system they can expect when they walk in the polling place, step-by-step instructions, videos on how to use the machines, accessibility information for voters with disabilities, and all kinds of information. And so we've obviously been putting that information out over the last several months, but now we have the next 5 months to put that out even more. And I think that that, combined with counties, I'm sure, will be doing much more voter education demos. Of course, they've been restricted in that because of all the COVID-19 issues, but hopefully we are all now moving into yellow and green. We can start having those voter education demos again, and I know the counties did a great job with that before COVID-19, and I know we'll be rolling those out again as soon as they can. Yes.
The groups that watched the election, they had their calls today, and they shared some of the observations that they had from different places. It sounded like Allegheny and Philadelphia seemed to have the most problems. But, I mean, some of them were just puzzling. Like they said, the polls weren't open at 7 a.m., voting machines were being delivered when voters were standing there, poll books were delivered to the wrong location. How does that happen? I mean, it's not their first time with an election.
I mean, literally, I think, and I can say as somebody who's been in elections for a long time, but Jonathan beats me by a long shot, every single election, those are the first reports to the hotline. It's been going on forever. I think there's just, there's some element of human error in any human operations, right? So those are very standard, and I wish we could eliminate them altogether, but certainly this year, I would say, it seemed to me that there were fewer of those reports than usual. I don't know if you...
There are, every election, as the Secretary said, there are polls that open late. The judge of elections doesn't show up, or they come and they forgot the keys, or sometimes there's a building manager that has to open up and they're not there. So, you have thousands of polling locations across the Commonwealth for every primary and election, so you're going to have a few that just don't come off without a hitch. Some of the machine issues, I think, certainly the changes to polling locations, related to COVID-19 probably contributed a little bit to that as well. The counties were dealing, as the Secretary said, with extraordinary circumstances. Training was limited too. A lot of their training classes were much smaller. They had to do some training remotely. So I think some of those things contributed, but it wasn't a widespread issue. It really didn't seem like it was a whole lot more than usual. Those things just happen, and it usually does boil down to human error.
Yes.
Because this was the first year that voters could cast their ballots by mail with no excuse, and you just mentioned that the number of incidents and concerns are less than prior years. Are there concerns for the November election concerning mail-in ballot requests and when counties can start counting those ballots?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. What we very much hope is to work with the legislature between now and November to allow the counties to start canvassing those mail-in and absentee ballots earlier. As I said, Act 12 of 2020 helped a lot. It gave the counties 13 hours more to canvass, but it's not enough. And I think we'll see that from this surge is one thing, but I think we could expect a lot more than this in November. Even without COVID-19, people now, have a head start on knowing this exists, and to have this amount of volume and participation and engagement we'll likely see that again. So I think the sooner, we supported counties being able to start pre-canvassing those ballots weeks before Election Day. But whether it's weeks before or days before, any amount more that we can give the counties helps them spread out that time period for them to do what's a very, very challenging job. Yes?
Just for clarification, because I like to be very specific, I'd imagine in the 6 counties where there's an extension, they will not have official results tonight. Can you ballpark how many counties will have official results tonight?
I can't ballpark how many counties will have official results tonight, but I would not be surprised if some of the counties even that are part of the 6 counties have official results, because, again, they need to be postmarked tonight. And so if a county, let's say, like Dauphin County, already has in a tremendous percentage of their ballots. And so they may well not have as many outstanding ballots after tonight. You know, I just don't know, or they may, and I just give them as an example. So it really depends on how close any particular race is. Of course, we don't have a contested presidential primary, so I expect that we will have, to a large degree, the results of that election in a outcome way. We will know who the winner is. Will we know the total number of votes cast? No, we will not. Yes.
Last thing for me, just overnight and into tomorrow, your team will be doing and focused on what, as far as, you know, following up with today's perfect storm election, as you kind of described. What's kind of the next step for you guys overnight and into the morning hours tomorrow? Is there anything you're focused on?
You know, I think we've already been starting to plan to work with the counties, particularly the counties that had the most challenges in the intersection of COVID-19 and the civil unrest and the large surge of ballots. How do we help? There are some counties who were able to start the process really early, get their ballots out early, and got their ballots back in earlier, have been able to have a smooth operation. We want to help those counties help the other counties that had bigger challenges. Here's the timeline. We've already talked about, you know, we've got, 5 months between now and, you know, the November election. Here's what here's what should start happening in July, here's what should start happening in August, and so forth, so that the counties can have a timeline to aim for in order to take account of the fact that we have, you know, several months ago when we were giving estimates to the counties on volume of mail ballots to expect, we were talking in the range of 20% that they should expect. We've, you know, far exceeded that already. But the counties now know that, right? So it allows us all to work together to plan forward. So, yes.
And with regard to the polling places, because there was a lot of confusion of where do you vote and all that, are you encouraging counties to keep the polling places where they were this time in November? And do you think there will be as many consolidated polling places?
I don't. The consolidations only applied to June 2nd, 2020, period. So no, I expect, you know, again, nobody knows what will happen with the public health situation come November. So I can't, you know, unfortunately, soothsaying has never been one of my skills. It would be helpful, but what I can say is the circumstances that existed this time will not be the same in November. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm very, very happy to say that based on how calm and peaceful and smooth today went, that we are going to cancel our 11 p.m. press conference. So thank you all.